And what's going on? It's your boys, JohnnyVTV and Doug Ziefel, getting ready for the Saturday night slate edition of Breaking Bet. It's been a little while. Some scheduling conflicts have kind of, held us back a little bit, but glad to be with you, my friend. How are you, Doug?
Doing good, Johnny. Well, I'm doing good personally, but in terms of college baseball wise, Friday night was a lot rougher than I anticipated it to be.
Yeah, for me, I had a bad day. Like last week was maybe my best college baseball weekend that I've ever had. And listen, obviously, this is one of the hardest, if not the hardest sport in any sport to handicap. So there's going to be regression. It's baseball. Shit happens. Can't cry about it. Got to get back ready for the next day. But before we go on to the Saturday slate, Doug, take me through some of your reactions to the Friday games. They featured a ton of upset. There was over a half dozen upsets between the ACC, Pac-12, and the SEC, as well as the Big 12. So what were you thinking on this Friday slate?
Yeah, I mean, as you highlighted, upsets are the name of the game here, and it burned a lot of plays on my card. South Carolina was a team we saw had a ton of steam. They opened up at minus 120 and were all the way up over $2 at one point. And I wound up getting in on them late at $1.95 and throw that right in the garbage with a late meltdown. Then you look at teams like LSU, you have Holman going, but then behind him is a complete implosion, and you never really get the bats to pick it back up.
To be honest, it sucks because it's the opening day of the conference play for college baseball, and particularly I want to highlight a couple of them. But before I do that, Doug, we were talking about this off air. I talked about this with our guy Noah Beanick on our joint podcast last night, and I actually quote tweeted Crutch. Shout out to our guy Crutch, friend of the show, how there was so much aggressive movement. And listen, we can't help the fact that we get great numbers right at the open. For instance, one of them was Georgia, money line minus 130 at Kentucky. Charlie Goldstein has been really good on the mound against a Wildcats offense that's really not that good. And Georgia has an offense that's putting up some of the best numbers in the country, led by Charlie Condon. And they were up 4-0 at one point. They allowed Kentucky to go on a 16-3 run, which is almost unheard of. But the thing is, and again, I pointed this out, when you get a team so early that gets steamed into oblivion, like Texas, like Georgia, for example, they were minus 130 at the open. They get all the way out to like minus 175, 180. At a certain point before opening pitch, when the steam is that big, it's that dramatic, then it starts becoming a plus EV play and a better look to take the other side, the underdog that was on the wrong side of all this action. And I didn't end up doing that. I knew I should have, and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I think this is something that we have to take notice of because I've noticed this happen as a trend over the last few weeks, months, since the season started. So when you're seeing a team that you get a great opening line, closing line value on, and right before opening pitch, the other team is a huge underdog, it starts becoming a good look to take them on the run line, maybe getting 1.5 or even 2.5, as a team like Ole Miss was at one point. So Texas A&M, Georgia, South Carolina, those are all three great examples of what I was talking about, how it was the right side on the open, and then it just becomes so dramatic that it ends up becoming really dangerous and alarming.
Yeah, it just goes to show that even though markets tend to trend towards efficiency and closing line value really is the name of the game with college baseball, and it's ever growing really now, and especially with multiple sports books putting up lines, run lines, and totals coming out a little bit more regularly, though they're still late, especially today. But it goes to show that it's still going to take a lot of time and a lot more money to come into this market to really nail down your closing line value, to really be confident in it. Essentially, this is still a bottom-up sport if you're looking at it from that perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good point. And also, when you're looking at it, you're on a Friday night slate especially. This is usually where I try to have my best card of the weekend because I'm usually backing the horses. You look at it, for example, Luke Holman, LSU, he's been dominant. He didn't allow an earned run before tonight. He had 40 strikeouts. He was one of the league leaders along with Ryan Prager from Texas A&M. And Holman goes into Mississippi State and he gets hit around. He wasn't able to locate his pitches. He was not sharp at all. And this is a perfect spot where you would take him, whether it's a run line or you're throwing him in a parlay. And Mississippi State had their Friday night guy, Nate Dom, missing today, and they're throwing a complete rando who is not a weekend guy at all, Saney, and it's an upset. But at the end of the day, you like your chances backing Luke Holman, who's been nothing short of sensational in a spot like this. Same thing goes with Ryan Prager for Texas A&M, hadn't allowed an earned run all year, tied with Luke Holman for the country lead in 40 strikeouts. He has a terrible game against Florida. Now, granted, it's a much better lineup than what he's faced thus far, and Florida is one of the most legit lineups in the country for sure, but he wasn't able to spot his pitches at all. So it's, this is kind of the 180, if you will, because you're seeing a lot of this action happen where it's fine to take the Friday night horses, but just in this particular case, it didn't work for some of them, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, though, one Friday night horse who I backed on 8 and 9 Ks, and who I actually should have hit 10 and 11 because he ended up having 5 innings, 11 strikeouts. That was Jonathan Santucci of Duke. Duke held on to this game 5-2 against Clemson. They had so many opportunities to probably put up a 10 or 11 piece. Nonetheless, they get the Friday night win after an impressive road series win against the Wake Forest team in Deacons, the then number 1 program. But now Clemson, a top 10 team in the country, they get a really good opening win on much needed. Santucci had a big bounce back, but now we're gonna have a little bit different matchup here. Duke opening out to a little bit more of a bloated -166 price. You're getting a little break on Clemson at +130. He's on Tristan Smith. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You taking Clemson here?
I am. This is the first team that jumped out off the page for me. This is a series that's going to be tight and it's going to be dependent on pitching. And right now, Clemson throwing Tristan Smith on a Saturday gives them the edge in this game. Tristan Smith is a guy that Clemson was very high on coming into this year. Their pitching was really based off of the upside, and he's stepped up while not being as dominant as a Friday night guy like Santucci. He's definitely going to give them an edge to get back in this series. And we really just need Clemson's bats to get something done against the Blue Devils bullpen here, because really that's what Duke is going to have left after Healy.
Yeah, so the thing is, Andrew Healy, he is a quality starter in the ACC. I think, it's question marks for the Duke starting rotation after Santucci. They have a lot of capable arms, but 2 and 3, Healy and whoever they throw on Sunday, whether that's Kyle Johnson or it's a bullpen day, you don't get as nervous if you're an opponent when you're facing these guys as opposed to Santucci. So for me, my handicap yesterday with our guy Noah was the same handicap for Duke that I had last week. Duke takes Friday, Clemson takes Saturday, Duke comes back and gets it done in a bullpen game on Sunday. I really like Tristan Smith. He's been very good this year. So for me, you're getting a good number. Here's one thing I would say. There is a good chance that a lot of action comes in on Duke again, the way it did yesterday and today. So you might actually get Clemson at a better number, but I feel like since our group is kind of the first ones on the scene with the sport, people might be now backing Clemson a little bit heavier. So this ultimately could end up tightening up if enough people are listening to us and playing what we're playing. But I definitely think the Tigers in a bounce back spot. This is where I would take them. I think if they win one game in this series, it's going to be tomorrow. And they fought hard today. Santucci had them on the ropes, but it's just Clemson wouldn't go away. They had Charlie Bielenson on the ropes as well. It was bases loaded in the bottom of the top of the ninth, and they didn't manage to score, Doug, but they were really putting them to the end here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the one thing that we're going to have to see come through. Like I said, is it's going to be Clemson's offense. They got to clutch up. That's really what we haven't seen a ton out of Clemson. It seems to be really high highs or really low lows with them, where we're going to need them to come up clutch and give Smith some early run support here.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We would definitely expect to see some more production out of Will Taylor, who he has 5 home runs, but he's not even batting 200.
Yeah.
This is a guy who is regarded as one of the better players in the nation, and he is probably their second best player behind Cam Camarella.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Clemson, me and you, I like them a lot. And if this line gets big tomorrow and Clemson becomes from 130 to maybe like 140, 145, 150, then I think I might be looking at a 2-unit play here. I really like Clemson tomorrow. Doug, take me to this next game. We get the Wake Forest Demon Deacons in what should be a bounce-back spot against Virginia. I didn't play anything officially on this game for Friday because, one of the looks I had, I really liked the over. Anything that was over 10.5, I liked it. And for obvious reasons, Virginia hit this number by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But Wake's in a bounce-back spot here with Chase Burns, who's coming off a career-high 14 strikeouts over 6 innings, allowing 1 run. Maybe the best he's ever looked. They really need a win. Are you laying it with Wake, who actually could be without Nick Kurtz after getting hurt diving for a foul ball?
Yeah, I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to lay it with Wake. Willing to lay it with Wake. That is a tongue twister right about now. But yeah, with Chase Burns on the mound at $1.60, it's a good price. Virginia really put a bad taste in my mouth last weekend. I was backing them all weekend against Miami, and the bullpen implosions have just really made me have my doubts against them. And we saw today Wake's offense beginning to wake up. Early in the year they struggled, and going back to they got Chase Burns on the mound. He's going to dominate for hopefully 5 to 6 innings. He's going to punch guys out. It all just comes down to whether Wake's offense stays hot and their bullpen really needs to. They need to hold down the Who's here. But 160 is a good price, in my opinion.
See, here's the thing. I need to see what kind of movement we get. I'm not ready to lay at 160 even with Chase Burns. This Virginia offense is definitely really good. They batted around Josh Hartle, that was the main reason why I wasn't sold on Wake for Friday, because Hartle has not looked good, and the pitching is supposed to be the strength of this team. And we know that the offense that I'm out on. I wasn't in on at any point in the preseason or to start this year. So for me, I'm probably going to be looking at a Chase Burns K-prop if we get one again. For me, I just don't know if I can bet against the Virginia lineup. The issue was the bullpen, and it still definitely is a problem. I think I might be out on this game for now. I need to see what kind of movement comes between now and tomorrow before opening pitch. But early lean would be to see where the Chase Burns K-prop is. I actually think this could be an under. So because there was a ton of runs scored, there was over 20 runs scored in today's game. I actually think there was 12 after 2 innings.
Mm-hmm.
We might get a little bit of an inflated total. The total, I believe, was 11 or 11.5. It got up to 12.5 at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're looking tomorrow at like a 14.5 run total, then I think I'm inclined to take the under. Although I would note that the books have gotten a little bit smarter. They realize who Chase Burns is, how good he is. So there might actually be a market accounting for that. But if you're able to get like 13.5 or 14.5, I'd probably look at the under, just because I would expect Burns to dominate in another bounce back performance on a Saturday that Wake desperately needs, Doug. Mm-hmm. And especially if Nick Kurtz is out, I don't know how Wake Forest is going to score more than 5 runs if Kurtz is out of the lineup.
Yeah, and you know what? You have to give credit to the guy on the other side here too. Virginia's going to throw Evan Blanco here. I mean, the lefty's been solid, holding a 3 ERA with an 11K per nine and a 1.17 WHIP through the season. You know, I mean, aside from Colin McKay's big numbers that are now overly inflated from the rough up today, Blanco was really one of their top arms, and him and Burns, like you said, they have a shot to turn this into a pitcher's duel. But it really depends on the number we get. Like you said, it looks like the total from today, it opened up too low. Like you said, it might open up too high tomorrow.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Let's go to the team that actually blew a parlay of mine since Oregon State ended up coming back. Dude, Oregon State was down 5-2 in the top of the ninth. They ended up scoring 5 runs to come back and win 7-5 at Utah. That was a really nice comeback win for Oregon State when they were clearly not at their best. LSU was the losing leg, of course. Thought I was going to steal one, but I didn't. But anyway, the LSU Tigers, much smaller favorite today or tomorrow at minus 195 at Mississippi State. State getting a lot of respect. They were cut down from about a plus 200 dog to now plus 150. You're going to have Cal Steven for State going against Gage Jump, the UCLA transfer, who has not allowed to run to this point. He's looked really good. Doug, I personally felt like Friday night was a must-win for LSU because when I talked to Noah on this podcast, the dual podcast of the college experience and Breaking Bet that we had Friday night, I said I thought there was a real chance that Mississippi State could win at least one of Saturday or Sunday, but had a shot to get both. Definitely LSU Friday night, but that didn't happen. Do you think LSU bounces back?
You know, this really is a game where I'm going to look at the total, honestly, because like you said, both these starters have been very, very solid. And, you know, you're gonna see the Tigers want to get this one back because if they're looking ahead to Sunday, not like they doubt their guy, not like they're going to sit there and doubt Thatcher Hurd, but you know their chances of losing the series are much higher if this. If it's 1-1 going into Sunday, it's not going to look good. It's not going to be. They're not going to be as confident heading into Sunday as they would. If they. Oh, sorry, what am I saying here? Very late here. What I'm saying is essentially LSU is going to come out. They need to make a statement. You know, their bullpen did not help them out. And if Gage Jump is not sharp, another guy here, like you said, hadn't get up a run, we're seeing regression through Friday. If we see it here with Gage Jump, it is really going to change the outlook of LSU going forward.
They really need Gage Jump to not only be strong tomorrow, but they need him to go at least 6 innings because LSU did not get what they needed from Luke Holman, and the bullpen, aside from being terrible, was already worked into a little too early. So they need Jump to eat up some innings. And for me, listen, I like what he's done thus far. Jump has been very solid to start the year, but Mississippi State is a really good program. I was high on them last year. I thought they were going to be able to make some noise last year, but it turns out I was a year too early, so that's why I went back to the well with them. I'm like, listen, I think this is the year Mississippi State takes the step and gets back into the conversation of being in Omaha. I have a nice size equity on Mississippi State to win it all, believe it or not, from the preseason. You know me. You know that I've been talking on this podcast about Mississippi State, and I believe in them this year. Ultimately, it's hard for me to see LSU not come back after losing 10-3 tonight. But I like Cal Steven. I already penciled in Sunday, Mississippi State with Durangelo Sencha, the switch pitcher, who's been great to start the year. And it really is hard for me to pick against him in favor of Thatcher Hurd. So I could be wrong. It's hard to see LSU lose this game, but I'm not laying 200 with the Tigers or 195 with them, with Gage Jump going. this is a Bulldogs offense that can rake. They score a lot. They have a perennial first-round talent this year in Dakota Jordan, superstar. The kid hits absolute piss missiles. I think Mississippi State's the play for me here, Doug. If I'm wrong, so be it. But I'm taking a team that is really good. They have a tough environment at home. They have maybe a wash at pitcher. And I just don't know if I'm going to be able to trust the LSU pitching at this point.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like, while this is a spot of urgency for LSU, just price point, it's not really, like you said, it's not reflective of how talented Mississippi State really is, especially when you're pricing out the pitchers here.
I'll tell you what, had LSU won tonight, even with using all their arms, I might be looking at this game a little bit differently the way I'm handicapping it. Whether that makes a difference or not, I think I might be looking at it a little bit differently. But I'm going to ride with Mississippi State. And you know what? If they lose, they lose. You're laying a long shot here at plus 150. And then I'm going to go right back to Mississippi State on Sunday, where they're probably going to get more. They're going to get a higher price, I should say, probably be towards like 165. So I'm riding Mississippi State the next 2 days. I think they're going to win at least one of the next two games. I think there's a good shot to take the series. And let me tell you something. If they take the series against the reigning national champion LSU Tigers in the opening week of the SEC play, I think everybody needs to start taking notice of how good this Bulldogs team can be in the year of 2024. Doug, kick me off here with this game that broke our hearts. The Texas A&M Aggies, the Florida Gators. Do you think Liam Peterson, the freshman for Florida, makes it 2 in a row for the Gators, or do the Aggies get right here?
You know, it's tough to call here, honestly, sidewise. I was looking at it right before we came on here, and after tonight, you know, being on the Aggies, the bullpens nationwide have given me the they have given me big reservations on even two of the most powerful teams in the country that we're going to see here. You know, and while I do like the stuff we've seen from Liam Peterson, whip is a little high, 1.25, not bad, but ERA at 5.06. You know, we've seen the flashes, but we've also seen that he can be touched up a little bit, and this Aggies offense has as much power as Florida. So this might be another spot where you look at the total here. You know, I know we were both on 10.5, right? We got that ESPN bet juiced line and cashed easily, unfortunately.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't even matter.
Could have played it to 16.5 and it would have hit.
Exactly. Unfortunately for Ryan Prager, his pretty stat line is not so pretty anymore. And then, you know, you look at Tanner Jones they're going to turn to tonight, who's been, technically almost tonight. It's still Friday. But Tanner Jones has been solid, though not going to work as deep. Like I said, this is a game where I'm going to look towards the total again.
I would agree with you. I get a little bit worried that 10.5, 11.5. I think it ended up settling at 12.5, if I'm not mistaken. I think we could see an open at like 12.5, 13.5 tomorrow. I probably would also play that over with you once the totals come out. But for me, I'm going back to the well at A&M. You know, listen, at the end of the day, Cade Fisher he didn't throw as bad as his line looked. He gave up 6 earned over 6 innings, but he struck out 10. He had the pitches working tonight. I think he just lost a little bit of control. Had that one bad inning. I think it was in the second inning, if I'm not mistaken. But to tell you the truth, Doug, you know, Texas A&M left a lot of meat on the bone. They only scored 6 runs tonight. They probably could have scored 11 or 12. They left way too many guys on base. They had key hitters up in big-time situations to not only get them back in the game, but to take the lead. And because they didn't do it, I feel like they're ready to come back for a bounce back. Tanner Jones has been great thus far. It's hard to take this Texas A&M pitching. It's hard to really evaluate them their stats have been great, but that's because of how easy their schedule has been thus far, and they haven't an opponent like Florida yet. But just the way they lost, I feel like they get right. Liam Peterson, north of 5 ERA, hasn't looked particularly good. Like Cade Fisher, very talented, but they have some stuff to work through. I had penciled in Florida. I really liked Florida to win on Sunday with Cags on the mound.
Mm-hmm.
So I think A&M's got to take this one. Minus 135 is fair to me. And I feel like the offense has a good bounce back here. And now what we know is Brandon Neely is going to be burnt for tomorrow because he threw 40 pitches tonight, maybe more than 40. So he's not going tomorrow. So I think if the Aggies want to get at least one in this series, Saturday is their best chance because Sunday's going to be tough sledding with Cags back on the mound. A game that I didn't play, I liked Tennessee, but I didn't end up putting it on my card. I wanted to see if there was some movement in favor of Alabama because Bama opened up at minus 130. I was hoping to see if they got out to like minus 140, even minus 150, and get a good buyback on Tennessee, but it ended up being the opposite way. The Volunteers for most of the day ended up being at an even coin flip, minus 115 with the line against Bama. They may have actually closed at like minus 130. So I ended up not playing it, but I did like Tennessee here, even against Ben Hess. They're out laying minus 130 now. I have a feeling this is going to get nothing but steamed in favor of Tennessee. Are you buying Drew Beam on Saturday to take the series against Bama?
Yeah, I've already bought Drew Beam at this price. I was on Tennessee tonight. You know, Causey was electric, and he's been, the biggest bolster to this Tennessee staff that we didn't really, nobody really touted. We were going to really think that Drew Beam was the guy on this staff, but Causey has come in and looked incredible, and he dealt, and the Vols were able to scratch runs through Hess. And what's the X factor for Tennessee is this offense is really deep. This lineup is very deep. They're going to keep coming. It doesn't matter how good Alabama's starting pitching is. They're going to continue to load up the base paths and figure out ways to score, especially for Saturday. Minus 130 is a good price with being here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it seems like it could be a bounce back spot for Bama, and to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me. But, even though Greg Ferrone, the lefty, has looked good so far, 1.72 ERA, I saw this guy pitch at Louisville last year. I wasn't that impressed. I don't think his stuff is that electric. Tennessee's offense, we knew was going to be light years better than what it was last year. You get a huge transfer in Billy Amick. You get a big-time transfer in Cannon Peebles. You have Blake Burke finally taking steps towards becoming the guy that we expected 2 years ago when he was a freshman. Kavaris Tears is making the leap. Dylan Dreiling's making the leap. Christian Moore is a star. This Volunteers offense is back to where it needs to be. I actually believe out of all the top 25 teams, and it's hard to say this, but I feel like even though Tennessee's been dominating teams, I feel like they've actually flown under the radar. Like there's been less talk about Tennessee as there has been with some of these other programs like A&M and Wake, and for whatever reason, whether it's good or bad, Wake, Duke, Oregon State. And, here we go. We have the Volunteers kind of humming. They're looking a little bit similar to what we saw in 2022 when they were maybe one of the best teams ever assembled. The pitching is still, for me, a concern long-term because A.J. Causey's been good. But, when you get to June, are we confident this is going to be the guy that we're rolling out on a Friday night or even a Sunday? A.J. Russell, kind of the same thing. I love Russell, and, we expect him back soon. But the one constant is Drew Beam. So I'm taking Volunteers minus 130 here. And if this, I'm going to take my own advice. If this gets bloated out to the Vols like minus 150, minus 160, then I think I'm going to look at taking Bama on the run line because I would expect the Crimson Tide to at least put up a fight tomorrow. So it wouldn't shock me to see them, lose this game maybe 8-7 or 7-6, something along those lines. As the last feature game, let's talk about another team that really let us down tonight, and that was a great opening line. South Carolina was minus 120. They got hit all the way out past minus 200. They were up most of the game, and then they just had one bad inning in the bullpen. They ended up losing to Ole Miss. They end up having a rally come up just short in the top of the ninth, lose 5-4. Ethan Petrie was atrocious. He went 0 for 4 tonight. It just really looks like South Carolina's out of sync. They lost the 2-game series last week or a couple weeks ago against Clemson. Do you think the Gamecocks get back on track here?
Price-wise, it tells you they should, but you know what? Honestly, I'm looking at a little more numbers because I haven't gotten a lot of eyeballs on Ole Miss. You know, they had a lot of their opening series out in Hawaii, and God knows I can't stay up any later for those matchups. But you know what? The more I look at it, Ole Miss is impressive on paper. I feel like they may be a little underrated here. I mean, they're going to throw Liam Doyle here, who, you know, he's only thrown 8 1/3, 3.24 ERA, but clearly has good stuff. The 18.4 K per 9, if I'm reading that correctly, and a whip just over 1. He's definitely going to give the first turn through the Gamecocks lineup. He could definitely be electric. But on the other side, you look at Dylan Eskew, who's been very solid, 2.89 ERA, whip under 1. He's definitely a good guy if you're South Carolina, you know, guy you want to have on the mound to bounce back. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure we go back to South Carolina here. I mean, Ole Miss has a WRC plus of 121. Their ISO is over 2. You know, they look good on paper, and this South Carolina series seems to be their first real test. And while South Carolina may have coughed up the first game themselves, I don't know if I can go right back to South Carolina here.
Yeah, I actually tend to agree with you on this one. This should be a bounce back spot, but considering how putrid the offense has been for the Gamecocks, the pitching has been serviceable. Believe it or not, the pitching has actually been decent. They have a good rotation with Eli Jones, Dylan Eskew, who's going to be going tomorrow, and they've been pretty much relying on Roman Kimball, who missed all of last year, for Sundays. Mm-hmm. But the offense, I don't know what they're doing. They're all slumping. It's crazy. I don't know how many times they've even had 10 runs in a game. Against Clemson, they didn't score more than 5 runs in a game. I think for me, on paper, it seems like it's a good get-right spot. They got a good pitcher going. But South Carolina, they got to show me something before I get back in bed with them. I haven't really taken the Gamecocks that much this year. I think Friday's slate was maybe only the second or third time all year that I played them straight up. I think I got to see it from them, Doug. I think at this point, even though it is a bounce-back spot, Ole Miss getting plus 120, and they're probably going to end up getting more because I would think that the Gamecocks, everybody's like, all right, well, South Carolina's got a good pitcher going. It's a bounce-back spot. They got to come back and get this win. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. And you know what's crazy? And shout out to our guy Noah Beanick. He was stressing the difficulty, especially in the SEC, of teams going on the road and winning games, series. And if you look at what happened tonight, South Carolina, the road team, lost. Georgia, the road team, lost. Texas A&M, the road team, lost. LSU, the road team, lost. Even Clemson, the road team, lost. It just Wake Forest, the road team, lost. Most of the home teams won, and believe it or not, most of the home teams were underdogs. They ended up closing as underdogs, most of them. Yeah, I mean, listen, even Oregon State had a tough time. You know, Oregon State was priced out at over minus 300 at Utah, and it took them a heroic ninth-inning rally where they scored 5 runs to come back and win. So I think while I always say the sports books get sharper, usually the second week of April, I think we also need to kind of recalibrate what we're looking at. It is a very, very home atmosphere based handicap when we're looking at these teams that are the home team. That a lot of the home teams in the top 25 this week might end up taking the series. Bro, even Texas Tech, I expected Texas Tech, that total was 11.5 at Baylor. The Texas Tech pitcher got lit up against Texas last week. The offense has been one of the best in the country. They were a big favorite against Baylor, and they only won 2-0. Like, now, Doug, maybe it was just a Friday night conference play thing. I'm not sure. But maybe this might be something I have to make note of. And honestly, the best way to learn is to get burned. You have to take it on the chin every once in a while to learn about what's going on here. So I feel like this is more of a coin flip game, even though the pitching might favor South Carolina from the starting perspective. But echoing my point, I just don't think I could lay 150 right now with the Gamecocks.
Yeah, and just one last thing is, like, we saw a ton of steam on South Carolina tonight, and we will likely see more steam on them. I mean, like I said, I think people are underrating this Ole Miss team, and this is another spot where you're gonna want to get the dog late, like Johnny has been reiterating here.
Yep, for sure. So I only highlighted 6 games, but there are a lot on the slate. Doug, were there any other games that you were looking into?
The one other team that caught my eye is, you mentioned them a couple times, Oregon State. Oregon State with Aiden May on the shelf has become a Saturday team. I'm a big fan of Komatz. I think he's their best arm now. They're priced out again at minus 300, but we should see their offense carry over here into the second game of the series. Now they got hot so late in their Friday night matchup. I'd be looking at a run line. I'd be willing to play them. If they're gonna stay around minus 300, I'd expect that run line to be around 3.5, and I'd be willing to play that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Oregon State is, they haven't looked that good in the last couple of weeks, but in all fairness, they're not fully healthy. A couple of their guys in the lineup are battling injuries. Brady Casper hasn't come back since he got hurt trying to get a fly ball in, I think, the second week of the season when they were in Arlington in the Cabata College baseball series. So I think Oregon State, they just got to keep racking up the wins, just get healthy, because, they should be able to landslide and breeze their way through this Pac-12 tournament, Pac-12 conference. For me, I'm looking at a couple games here, Doug. I really think it kind of falls in the same category. And I was talking about this with Noah Beanick. I keep mentioning him, but very, very sharp baseball mind. We kind of liked Oklahoma against TCU for Friday, just fading Peyton Tolley, fading TCU. They, kind of look like fool's gold right now. And we would think at some point they start looking like the team that made the run last year. But do you find Oklahoma is a good bet again? They're plus 190 at TCU's facing Cole Klecker, who has not been good, north of a 5 ERA. You going back to the well with the Sooners?
Yeah, I was on Oklahoma today. I found them at they're plus 200 over on Bet Rivers. It was like 30 cents higher than the rest of the market, and I basically picked off the number. But my thought process was also most of what you said. Like TCU, definitely a bit overhyped here. The pitching has not lived up to what we thought it could be, and Cole Klecker has been in the definition of a sophomore slump for him. And if they're going to sit around 190, we know this Oklahoma lineup has some experience. They should be able to hit him around. Definitely plus 190. They're probably going to be a small play again.
I agree. I think I'm going to wait, because I think a lot of people, again, like South Carolina, are going to say, TCU, they lost to Oklahoma. They lost kind of convincingly. They're going to come back. They got to win. They just lost a series to Kansas. They got it. They just lost a series to Kansas. They just lost their Friday night opener to Oklahoma. Cole Klecker's on the mound. He's got to bounce back at some point. I think a lot of people are going to think this way. I think TCU moves from like minus 250 to maybe minus 280. And I think we might get a better number on the Sooners. So this is another one where I'm eyeing Oklahoma. I think I'm probably going to throw it in a little sprinkle tomorrow, but I'm going to wait till closer to game time. It doesn't kick off until 6 p.m. Eastern time, so we're going to have a lot of time to review this line here, Doug. Any interest in where was it? Any interest in taking Washington again?
It's funny you say that. I just looked at that game. I'm staring at it right here. I was trying to dig into it a little bit before we came on. Calvin Kirkhoff, very intriguing here. I mean, he's through 19 innings, 2.79 ERA. Doesn't miss bats, which is a little concerning at the college level, obviously. But going against Cody Howard, another guy for Texas who does not miss bats, it might be a matchup where you see Washington's lineup who has barely been above average at this point. They could definitely give Texas a run for their money here. I'd be interested to see what a run line looks like for this matchup.
I'm betting. I would bet. So last night I was talking about how I thought Washington was a good play. I wasn't necessarily going to take them on the money line just because I felt like LeBaron Johnson was due for a bounce back, and he certainly had that. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a shame. 6 innings, career high 10 strikeouts, looked phenomenal. But the bullpen does what the bullpen does, and they imploded. So not only did you waste a great outing on a Friday night, but now, again, your bullpen is already back to their usual tricks of blowing leads and not being able to execute, and they're using guys that ordinarily they probably would have wanted to save until tomorrow or Sunday. I think Washington, again, is another play where I would sprinkle it. And if they don't win tomorrow, I think I'm going to take them again on Sunday because I have a feeling Washington could end up taking the series. And for me, I'd probably wait a little bit longer to see if Texas moves out from minus 315 to a little bit bigger number. And then that way you can get a better price on Washington. So, I mean, we're looking at some long shots here that I think have real legs and have a real shot to go home for the Saturday slate, Doug.
Yeah, the theme of Saturday for your Saturday morning handicapping is going to be wait and see because things are just going to get better, price-wise at least. And hopefully we can cash a couple of these and have a nice day.
I did want to talk about another one. This usually is this segment, Big Underdogs Worth a Look. So maybe for now I'll switch it. But a game that I actually was on in a couple ways, neither of them hit, was James Madison, Coastal Carolina. I felt that James Madison is a good enough program to hang with them. They gave Arkansas a tough battle in the opening weekend. They have some guys that could really do some damage. And I took the 3.5 run line with James Madison. This was a 4-1 game going into the bottom of the 8th. They were down 4-1 going to the bottom of the 8th, where if they don't give up any runs and then they don't end up scoring more than 2 runs in the top of the 9th, they end up covering a 3.5 run line. So it just goes to show. I mean, Coastal big dicked them in the bottom of the 8th. They put up 2 grand slams. Blake Barthel, I think, hit his 12th home run in 11 games. The kid is on. There's red hot, white hot, and whatever Blake Barthel is. But I don't know. Do you think I should go back to the well with James Madison if I'm getting another 3.5? This time it's Riley Eichhoff on the mound, who has not been as good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this JMU team they're scrappy. That's kind of the way I'd look at them in this series is they're going to find a way to give Coastal's pitching problems. But like you said, there's always a chance that the Chanticleers just blow it open like they did today. And that's kind of what it makes you have to be hesitant about, really investing in them. I definitely would have to see what the run line looks again today. Like you said, Eichhoff has not been great, but he's someone that needs to get right if this Coastal team is going to live up to what their offense has been producing.
I took the total at 16 as well, just because I'm like, you know, they could hit this total by themselves. They ended up getting 12, so it ended up being 13 total runs, but it was really because both teams got off to a slow start. I don't know if there was any runs scored after the first 3 innings or within the first 3 innings. And then it still ended up being a 13-run game when the total was 16. Ultimately, because Coastal mercied them in the bottom of the 8th after a huge inning, JMU didn't get a shot to bat in the top of the 9th. And, JMU scores 3 runs, we push. If they score 4, we hit. Where are you feeling comfortable taking a Coastal over tomorrow? Like, what's the number that you have to see where, like, oh, I'm definitely betting that over?
Realistically, it'll probably. I feel like the total is going to be very similar to what it was today. We've seen these Coastal totals in Conway, be in that mid-teen range. I mean, I honestly, I might be with your thought process and how a Coastal can cover these mid-teen totals themselves. If we get like a 15.5, a 16, I'm definitely going to consider it. Honestly, JMU's got to participate eventually, but I feel like the Chanticleers are almost a team that's good for double-digit runs, especially in this series.
I think my philosophy is I just got to keep playing Coastal Carolina's totals to the over. I feel like at the end of the season, when we look back on what do they play, 56 regular season games? I feel like if they play 56 regular season games, they'll probably hit the over in at least 35 or 40 of them. So I feel like it's to me, unless you have a really good look of to why you should play the under, it's almost like my philosophy and most people's philosophy in roulette when you're deciding whether to bet red or black. Don't try to jump back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just stick to your color. And my color is the over for Coastal. And listen, sometimes you're going to get burned, but there's a better than not chance most nights they have an opportunity to hit the total by themselves. So I think that's probably where I would go back to the well. It was a little bit lower scoring today, so maybe 16 becomes 15 or 15.5 tomorrow. It's hard to envision Coastal not getting at least one over this weekend. And I would think that JMU's offense is probably a little bit better tomorrow if Riley Eichhoff continues to pitch the way he has been, where he wasn't particularly sharp at all against Michigan last weekend. Noah, real quick, I wanted to get your opinion here. There was a lot of games we didn't cover, but we'd be here all night. What's your thoughts on Georgia and Kentucky, round 2? Do you feel like Georgia at minus 150 gets off the schneid at the Wildcats?
Again, just more bullpens putting very bad taste in my mouth, and I need to forget that and move on to Saturday. Georgia's offense, as legit as it comes. They can explode. We've seen them do it. They put up crooked numbers left and right. But their bullpen had put up a crooked number of their own tonight, and it's an issue. But like you said, Kentucky's offense, if we're gonna go blow for blow, you're gonna take Georgia here. And Leighton Finley's been solid. 2.45 ERA, whip just over 1 versus Dominic Neiman going for Kentucky. ERA of 4.74. Whip is in whipped 1.42. 150 seems like a fair price now that I'm looking at who Kentucky has. This might be another situation where we see Georgia steam up a little bit, even though they're coming off a loss.
It's tempting for me to take Georgia minus 150 and a bounce back, even though they just bent me over a barrel and showed me the 50 states. For me, I want to see where the total lands tomorrow. I got this over at 10.5. I couldn't believe it. I should have put 15 units on it. I kind of thought it would go a different way. It would hit the total. It would hit over 10.5, but it will go a different way. I think because there were so many runs scored, I think there was 26 total runs scored in this game.
16.
So we might see a total set at like 14.5 tomorrow, maybe even 15. I wouldn't be surprised. Where's the cutoff to take the over here?
I feel like your estimation sounds about right. I wouldn't even say that. I wouldn't say that's like the cutoff as to where I'm not touching it. But 14.5, 15 is about what I would take it up to. Like I said, I'm a strong believer in the Bulldogs offense. Charlie Condon has been unbelievable. And Georgia's lineup is just, they are a machine that keeps rolling, and don't have a lot of faith in Kentucky's pitching.
I think honestly, I would say I'm expecting Kentucky's offense to slow down. Like usually after a team, especially one that's not very potent on offense, has a blow-up game, they usually have a huge come down to earth crash regression the next day. And Leighton Finley has been good. I think I need a little bit more time to think this one over because Georgia's going to score. That's what Georgia does. They're not one of these teams that's like, oh, someday you're going to get 15 runs, someday you're going to get no runs. That's not how they are. They probably average about 8, 9. No, they probably average about 9, 10 runs a game, I would say. So for me, I think if the total is like 13.5, I'd probably play the over because I think Georgia is feeling the pressure to get back on the schneid in order to have a shot to win the series on Sunday. For the money line, though, I think I need a little bit more time, but I did want to hear your thoughts before I made my decision. Doug, any other games that you wanted to look into?
No, we covered a lot of my favorites, honestly. This is a slate, like I said, it's going to be a lot of wait and see how the market develops overnight, and then once more books come out, things are going to start steaming. It's going to be a lot of games are going to wind up capping tomorrow morning, honestly.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So for my Saturday card, I didn't officially write it down just because I know I'm going to be adding more, and I talked about some of the looks that I had for tomorrow. But so far, what I have officially is the Volunteers money line minus 130. A&M money line minus 135, Clemson money line plus 130, Mississippi State money line plus 150. With Tennessee and maybe A&M, there's going to be some buyback that I'm going to flip to the other side and play the underdogs run lines in order to mitigate any loss and potentially hit both. Shoot for that middle. I think tomorrow's slate is going to be a lot lighter for me. I had 20 plays today, like a real degen. I kind of get wrapped up in it. So I'm going to try and cap it at 10 tomorrow. I will be on the lookout for some strikeout props from Chase Burns. But, Doug, really appreciate the time, my friend, and tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at Doug Ziefel on Twitter. I'm going to post all my plays. I've been posting my college baseball cards despite not having written articles. If anybody needs, people commenting on why do you like this team, I will 100% respond. Just as we've broken down plays here, I'll give you everything that I think through here. But yeah, full card should be out sometime mid-morning tomorrow, and a lot of the plays that you heard here tonight are going to be there as well.
Love it. Well, everybody, we really appreciate you tuning in. It was great to get back in here on a Saturday. It's been a few weeks, so we appreciate you tuning in and hope you have a great Saturday with a lot of bets. Keep an eye out on Doug's Twitter as well as mine at _JohnnyVTV for any updates and additional plays that we add. We are expecting to see a lot of line movement between now and game times. So make sure you're staying on top of it to get to the best of the number. We'll see you next week, and everybody, let's cash some winners.